I still remember the sound of the door closing. It wasn't slammed, there was no shouting, no dramatic pause, no last look over her shoulder. Just the quiet click of the latch, the kind of ordinary sound you'd never think could divide a life into before and after. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more real stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. I was in the kitchen, coffee going cold on the counter, thinking about nothing more serious than how late I was running for work. By the time I realized the house felt different, too still, too empty, she was already gone. Her name was Sarah. We'd been together 7 years, married for 3. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least that's what I believed. We talked about kids in that casual, someday way. We argued about money, about whose turn it was to do the dishes, about whether the TV was too loud at night. Normal stuff, life stuff. The kind of things people fight over when they're planning to grow old together. That morning there was no note, no text, no missed call. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her side of the closet was half empty, but not in a rushed way, more like someone had packed carefully, thoughtfully, taking only what mattered most. Her toothbrush was gone. Her favorite sweater wasn't hanging on the hook anymore. But our wedding photo was still on the wall, perfectly straight, dusted like she'd taken care not to disturb it. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd gone to stay with her sister for a day or two, needed space, needed air. People do that. Couples do that. They don't disappear. But days passed, then weeks. I filed a missing person report after the first week, feeling ridiculous and desperate at the same time. The officer was polite but skeptical. Adults leave, he said gently. Sometimes they don't want to be found. I wanted to scream that he didn't know her, that Sarah would never do this without saying something. She was kind to a fault, the type who apologized when someone else bumped into her. She wouldn't vanish without a goodbye. Friends tried to help at first. They brought food, sat with me on the couch, listened to me replay every conversation from the past year like it was evidence in a trial. Did I miss a sign? Did I say something wrong? Was there a moment I could point to and say, that's when it broke? Her sister Emily cried with me but wouldn't meet my eyes. She said she didn't know anything, that Sarah hadn't called her. But something in her voice felt guarded, rehearsed. I ignored that feeling because trusting it would mean believing there was something being kept from me. Eventually, the casseroles stopped coming. The calls slowed down. People moved on, because that's what people do when your tragedy becomes inconvenient. I didn't move on. I stayed in that house, surrounded by her absence. I slept on my side of the bed, leaving her side untouched, as if she might come back and slip under the covers like nothing had happened. I kept her mug in the cabinet, her shampoo in the shower, her scarf on the hook by the door. For a long time I was angry. Angry at her for leaving, angry at myself for not stopping her, angry at the world for continuing as if my life hadn't shattered. I imagined 100 reasons she might have gone. Another man, a secret life, a sudden realization that she didn't love me anymore. Each possibility hurt in its own way. A year passed. Then 2. I learned how to function again, not how to live. I went to work, paid bills, smiled when required. At night, I talked to her like she could hear me, asking questions I knew would never be answered. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me enough to explain? On the 3rd anniversary of her disappearance, I finally took down our wedding photo. Not because I stopped loving her, but because the pain of seeing it every day had become unbearable. When I lifted the frame, something slipped out from behind it and fell to the floor. An envelope. It was yellowed with age, edges soft like it had been handled many times. My name was written on the front in Sarah's handwriting, not rushed, careful, beautiful. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 2 weeks before she left. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and read it in one breath, then again, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. She wrote that she loved me. That part was clear, repeated, almost desperate. But then the truth unfolded, line by line. Sarah was sick, not the kind of sick you recover from. Not the kind you fight and win with enough hope and determination. She had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive neurological condition that would slowly take away her mobility, her speech, and eventually her independence. The doctors had given her a timeline, uncertain but cruelly short. She wrote about sitting alone in the car after the appointment, screaming until her throat hurt, about practicing smiling in the mirror so I wouldn't notice anything was wrong, about watching me talk about our future, trips we'd take, kids we might have, and feeling like she was stealing something by letting me dream. She said she couldn't bear the idea of me becoming her caretaker. Couldn't stand the thought of me watching her disappear, piece by piece. She wanted me to remember her as she was, not as she feared she would become. So she left. She wrote that she'd arranged for treatment out of state, then eventually out of the country. Experimental programs. Long shots. She didn't know how long she'd last. She didn't know if she'd ever be brave enough to come back. And the line that broke me most was near the end. "If I say goodbye," she wrote, "you'll try to stop me, and if you try to stop me, I won't be strong enough to go." I don't remember how long I sat there after I finished reading. Hours, maybe. The sun moved across the room, and still I didn't move. Grief hit me in a new way, not sharp and sudden, but heavy and crushing. She hadn't left because she didn't love me. She left because she loved me too much, in the only way she thought she could. Anger returned, but it was tangled with sorrow now. How could she decide my life for me? How could she take away my choice to stand by her? I tracked down Emily that same week. This time, I didn't let her deflect. I showed her the letter. She broke down immediately, sobbing apologies. She told me Sarah had sworn her to secrecy, made her promise not to tell me unless years had passed and there was no other choice. Sarah had wanted the letter destroyed, but Emily couldn't bring herself to do it. Emily told me where Sarah had gone first, then where she'd gone after that. It took months of emails, phone calls, and dead ends, but eventually I found a clinic overseas that confirmed Sarah had been a patient there. They wouldn't give me details, citing privacy laws, but they told me one thing: she was alive. That single fact became my oxygen. I didn't hesitate. I took a leave of absence from work, packed a bag, and flew across the world with no real plan beyond needing to see her. On the long flight, I rehearsed what I'd say. I imagined her anger, her fear, her relief. I imagined her not wanting to see me at all. The clinic was small, tucked between mountains and sea, quiet, peaceful. When I gave my name at the desk, the receptionist looked at me with something like recognition. She led me to a garden. Sarah was sitting in a wheelchair under a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves onto her hair. She looked thinner, older, but when she turned her head and saw me, her eyes were exactly the same. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she cried my name like it was a prayer. I knelt in front of her, not caring who saw, and took her hands. They trembled, but they were warm, real. She apologized over and over, voice breaking, trying to explain everything I already knew. I told her about the years without her, about the nights I'd waited, about the letter behind the frame. I would have stayed, I said, no matter what. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. That's why I left. I stayed with her for weeks, then months. We talked about everything we'd avoided before. Fear, anger, love, regret. There were days when the illness was kind, and days when it wasn't. Days when we laughed like we used to, and days when the future felt unbearably small. But we faced it together. Sarah never fully recovered. The condition progressed, slowly but steadily. Yet there was peace in knowing the truth, in choosing honesty over silence. When her body grew weaker, her spirit didn't. On a quiet evening, years after she'd walked out of our house without goodbye, I sat beside her bed as the sun set outside the window. She squeezed my hand with what strength she had left. "Thank you for finding me," she said. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing her in, committing every detail to memory. I never stopped, I told her. She smiled, soft and tired, and for the first time since that morning long ago, the sound of goodbye didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the truth finally coming home. Some stories end, but their lessons live forever. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.